And thanks for staying with us here on the JoyNews channel. It's our special coverage of the vote of censure proceedings against Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. And of course, this is the Pulse on the JoyNews channel. We're taking you right now to Parliament, where all of the action is. Hours of course, the minority stating their position on why they believe the Finance Minister should not continue to hold office. I want to bring in now my colleague, parliamentary correspondent Kweku Asante, who's been monitoring events for us as the ad hoc committee proceeds on a break now. Kweku, if you can hear me, what's the latest in the House right now?
So, gov't Asari-Otredakun, lawyer for Ken Ofori-Atta, has just left the committee room. Not so happy with the process that has gone on so far. Indeed, you've seen him during the live proceedings raising objections to some specific questions, some specific answers, some specific documents that Dr. Kesey Alatoforsen and the minority leader Haruna Idriso have been tendering in furtherance of their claims to get Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta out. And so when they come back from this one, of course, minority leader Haruna Idriso and Dr. Alatoforsen will be expecting to wrap up their arguments. It is not expected that today Ken Ofori-Atta, as Finance Minister, will respond to these allegations. Today is to afford him the opportunity to sit through this hearing, listen to the specific grounds and allegations that are being made against him so that he can prepare a defense and do so. Indeed, early on today, we heard from the co-chair of the committee, Katie Hammond, who just also left the place. He's been saying that the expectation is that if the minority whose censure motion has been referred to this special ad hoc committee conclude their testimony to the committee, the Finance Minister could take tomorrow and then the next day to make his presentation to the House. So the Finance Minister can have a lot of time, indeed Wednesday and on Thursday as well, if he has some response to these claims and allegations that have been leveled against it. But substantively, you've seen a number of splits between the committee to the NPP side, to the NDC side, with almost each and every one of them making up some argument that favors their perspectives, right? You've heard from Andrew Ajapamesa, who's been seeking to introduce some documents, some documentations, some information that sort of vindicates Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, that says that he's properly managed the economy. You've also heard from people like Okujoto Ablakwa, Zaneto Ajiman Rollins, Bernard Ahiafo, and of course, co-chair Dr. Dominic Ayine, who've all been canvassing a position that sort of lines or the arguments of Dr. Kesey Alatoforsen. Will be seeking to also who spoke to a local radio station in Kumasi, saying that, I mean, Katie, I beg your pardon, gov't Asari-Otredakun had said somewhere, insinuating that he was the one behind this majority claims for the Finance Minister to leave. So it's kind of a lot of issues to unpack. But bottom line, the minority have been leading evidence to back their 7 grounds within which they laid in their grounds of censure against the Finance Minister, that he's not fit, he's incompetent to lead the finance ministry in this time of economic difficulty. We'll be expecting that when it's time for the Finance Minister to do so, either he himself will do some presentation or his lawyer, gov't Asari-Otredakun, will lead evidence to specific legal facts that he thinks bears out his client, Ken Ofori-Atta, in this matter.
And Kweku, if you can hear me, there are more issues coming up. At the start, of course, it was heated. Now we're getting a sense of where we're headed. Do we know what are the 3 outstanding issues? The ranking on the Finance Committee was insistent that he had to make a point on. I guess that's what's outstanding now, and basically what we're expecting to hear once the House reconvenes. I mean, the committee by extension.
So there are a number of things having to do with incompetence. You know, this is a wide word in terms of its definition, and there are those who have argued that the censure motion is sort of a quasi-legal proceeding, and so the argument that you'll be leading must be found in law. the others who have said and who have lined up with that position of the minority that this is a political matter and that you should be able to raise some of this issue. They are against turning this committee into a court so that you go strictly to the rules of court in terms of tendering evidence and all that. So these are some of the sticking points between the minority and the majority MPs on the committee. Particularly, we've been hearing forcefully from Andrew Ejapamesa, who is the Deputy Energy Minister, the Member of Parliament for Second D, who's also been on this committee, forcefully making the argument that some of the claims, indeed, let me recount some of the things that I've said. Andrew Ejapa says that the Tuna Mahama, who was the resident director of IMF in the country, had spoken on Joy FM Newsfire and had contradicted the claims of Kesel Atoforsen that the finance ministry had been misreporting data. That is not a position that the majority side have been supporting. Indeed, he led from KT Amon, who says that, okay, they must tarry slowly a bit on that. So clearly, the committee is divided. Even before they present their report, it is clear that those on the NDC side are hell-bent on supporting what the minority leader Haruna Idrisu and Dr. Kesel Atoforsen, who are presenting a case for the minority, have been presenting. We've also heard from Ejapa Mesa and other members of the NPP who are clearly saying that the finance minister must lose his job in this contest.
And Kweku, the issue about the co-chair, of course, this is a unique process, something we've not seen, I'm not too sure, in the lifetime of this parliament. How is that panning out? I mean, looking at what we've seen so far and looking at that posture between that of the minority co-chair and that of the majority, would you say that we're in for a very tough time? Of
co-chair and other things were not going to work. Indeed, you've heard from KT Amond, you've also heard from Dr. Dominic Ayine. There are a number of times where they have conflicting views on what should happen. Normally in Parliament, you have a chairman and you have a ranking member. The ranking member to lead the minority MPs on that committee. It is quite unique in this situation to have co-chair. That means they have to come together in agreement on certain matters. So when the lawyer for Ken Ofori-Atta, Gabi Asare-Otchere-Darko, has raised issues, has raised some objections, there have been times when Dr. Dominic Ayine held a contrary view, and there were times where KT Hammond also held a contrary view. So both MPs had to now come together, try and find a common ground before they can make a ruling. There's been times when they've just ceded to each other. So a number of occasions, only Dr. Dominic Ayine on his own has overruled questions that have been filed by the Honorable Andrew Ejapa-Mesa. There's been times when KT Hammond on his own has also overruled questions that have been asked by the Honorable Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa. So that kind of unique arrangement is proving to be a challenge. But, I mean, as time goes on, they've been trying to gel together. So there are those, I remember on Thursday, when the Speaker made this referral, who said that it's not going to be possible for these two co-chairs, especially when they are coming from completely different positions in the House, to be able to agree on some of these key issues. But clearly, they've been finding some difficulty from the start, but they are seeking to be able to work together for the betterment of the committee and the kind of work they are supposed to do. Because this is a political process. KT Amon is a New Patriotic Party MP. Sometimes, I remember when the Honorable Kesel Atoforsen was making his position, KT Amon came in to say that, well, some of these things that you term as fiscal irresponsibility was simply government building roads, was simply government building schools, building bridges. Why are you not saying that also? So clearly, his political colorization manifesting in that regard. And there's been times when Dr. Dominic Ayine, who is actually a co-sponsor of this censure motion, but still happens to be a deputy, the other co-chairman on this committee, has also made some forceful arguments that seek to support his colleagues. So it is clearly some very interesting sticking points on this matter for now.
The final issue about the financial misreporting and the breach of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Largely the minorities putting out some figures. Quickly, let's get to the figures briefly.
So you've heard from Dr. Kesel Atoforsen referring to the 2018, 2019, 2020 budgets of the finance ministry, the specific issues that they laid out in terms of what they thought will be the budget deficit. He says that some of the data they represented to Parliament was markedly different from that which they represented to IMF, and that he sought to say that that was because the finance minister was being dishonest. He said as a committee, and he belonged to the finance committee, they have tried on a number of occasions to try and come to a certain common grounds as to why the finance minister does so. The finance minister had insisted that in terms of their reporting of the numbers, they were just being accurate. But he sought to suggest that by presenting different figures to Parliament and by presenting set of different figures as well to the IMF, the finance minister clearly was trying to hide something, because as Parliament, and in the last Parliament, MPP had an overwhelming majority, and so there were a number of issues they could simply push through by virtue of their numbers. This time around, it's not the same, so they've been facing some challenges. He sought to suggest that it's because of the close numbers in the House, that is why the finance minister is now, adding all these figures. He made some references to over the line and below the line discussions of issues having to do with the deficit reporting, the 2.8% that you heard him say there. It clearly was referring to the Public Financial Management Act, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which mandates the finance minister not to go beyond a certain threshold of deficit. He says the finance minister has breached all those, with the exception of 2018, because at the time, the Fiscal Responsibility Act had not come into force. And also in 2020, because of COVID, the finance minister suspended the rule. So prior to that, he sought to suggest that the finance minister had been breaching that, and that it was even a surprise that the censure motion had delayed in coming in now, and that clearly, because of these alleged infractions of the finance minister, the situation was ripe now for the censure motion to be moved and debated. But the sticking point really has been about how this committee is supposed to do its work. Is it supposed to be an inquisition? Are they supposed to be asking the persons who are leading evidence to clarify their statement? Or they are just supposed to sit, listen to them make their presentation, listen to the finance minister as well, then come to some sort of conclusion and then make a presentation in the form of a report to the House for the House to debate and vote on it. These are some of the disagreements, but so far they found their way to be able to work around it. And when they come back, it is expected that the matters having to do with whether or not the finance minister has been incompetent will be argued by Kesela Tuforsen and the minority leader Haruna Idrisu before the House will probably take an adjournment for today in expectation of the finance minister himself, Ken Ofori-Atta, appearing to defend his position tomorrow.
Then, Kwekwe Santi, we'll be back to you to get the very latest. I want to bring in our brother, Lord Mensah of the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you for your time here on the Pulse. And you've heard the minority state their position largely on fiscal matters, claims of misreporting of figures and some more issues. Let's take it from the breach, first of all, of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. What's your take on what we've heard the ranking on the Finance Committee say?
Clearly, it is an act that, in the preparation towards the IMF exit, it was an act that was more or less to guide us and then to put us in that financial discipline, pedestal, so that at least we will not end up with IMF. So this act has some, parameters as far as our macroeconomic front is concerned for us to follow. And so one of them is 5% budget deficit, for which, if you are to go by the act, the finance minister was supposed to keep to that 5% budget deficit. So in effect, if you take the dynamics, this Responsibility Act came in force somewhere 2018 thereabout. And the minority is asking that after the law, we still had the finance minister breaching this Fiscal Responsibility Act by presenting budgets that the deficit is way above the 5%, which we all know, the consequence of, reading a budget that the budget deficit is huge. You end up borrowing to finance, the budget deficit. So effectively, what they're trying to pinpoint is that the finance minister is not financially disciplined enough when it comes to keeping to economic numbers. And then also looking at the uncertainties in reporting of our debt figures. That is also one of them. And we all understand that the economic space does not like noise. Noise means today one figure, tomorrow another figure. Today one place a figure, and then another place a different figure. So effectively, the noisy nature can even scare, investors. And in a way, the confidence that they will have in the economy will not be there. So all pinpoint, to the build-up of the non-performance of the finance minister. And so it's not surprising they were parading this. But then one thing that baffles me, I think I was somewhere when I saw that the lawyer side of the finance minister asking for, documents as far as some of the accusations are concerned. And I was asking myself whether most of if still any underhand deal that you get a receipt for it. That's the question I ask. Then obviously, most underhand deals will go scot-free in the law court if we should look at evidence alone. But then the numbers exhibit, the numbers show clearly. So I think the minority were using the numbers to indicate that the finance minister has not been performing to the expectations of a typical finance minister. And as a result of that, that is, why our economy has gotten to this level. And I think that is true. Because you cannot, accuse the finance minister based on some of the things is done, behind doors. The only thing you can present is the numbers. So if the minority is pushing for the numbers in that regard, I think it's in the right direction. That's the only way you can use to nail him,
And then the implications for our economy, now that we have our finance minister facing this quote-unquote trial, if I may call it that way, what's going to be the impact?
Yeah, the implications are huge. I wish it would not have gotten to this level, to the point where the president would have acted on when the finance minister's head was being called on. As we speak now, it has created that kind of a cloud of uncertainty in our economic direction, and even to the extent budget has not been read. So what is happening now in this country is not a good signal at all, and it has a strong implications on our economy. Because anybody sitting out there or sitting in-house in Ghana planning for the next moment, he may not be able to plan, So effectively, it has a lot of implications, which we're not supposed to take it for granted. But it's part of our democratic, dynamics, which we may have to experience. At the end of the day, it's a test which will go into the books, and in future, we know what to do anyway.
What's your suggestion? That the finance minister voluntarily leaves office even before the processes are completed?
That is why I'm saying that how I wish we would not have gotten to this level, where we have to, sit the finance minister down, to hear his case on that's the Constitution stipulate that. But I was thinking we've overstretched the Constitution to this level. So for me, I think it could have bowed out, humbly, so that the economy can move on.
Okay, then. We'll have to leave it here. We'll still wait for, of course, the next 30 minutes as the ad hoc committee resumes sitting. Professor Lord Mensah, I'm grateful for your time. Please stay. We'll be back shortly.